It is an overcast, rainy day here. I promise I'm not usually this reflective. That said, I am in desperate need of some sunlight, and a haircut, and an adequate night's sleep. So you get this. So I've been meaning to make this video for a while. In fact, I've been meaning to make pretty much any video for a while, but continuously was putting things off because of ADHD related reasons mostly. So initially I had plans for how absolutely epic this was going to be, but it turns out I'm a caveman who has no idea what he's doing, has no idea about video editing, video filming, and has no access to equipment that would allow me to do that. I'm actually filming this on my phone right now, propped up on I don't even actually know what this is. Bear with me, you get what you get, and hopefully the quality of these is going to improve with time. What I wanted to talk about today was just some stuff that I think might be kind of relevant right now in particular, just given that we've all been in isolation for 2 months, and I think a lot of people have been sitting around sort of reflecting on things that they may have not otherwise taken time to think about, or rather were burying in day-to-day life and probably trying to avoid addressing in the first place. Anywho, I will start with an introduction. My name's Finn, I'm a 30-year-old transgender man, and I have a lot of feelings and opinions on stuff. What I wanted to talk about today was what the process looked like for me, realizing I was trans and coming out, and how that felt specifically. I think that there's a lot of conversations about, what the trans experience is supposed to look like and all of these boxes you need to tick, but not really a big conversation on some of the emotional things that you experience, some of the weird self-sabotage that goes on, and that loop of trying to convince yourself that you're not. When I was early in my transition, I noticed that a lot of the material out there was just kind of targeting cis people and explaining what the trans experience looks and feels like to them, but this I wanted to do more for other trans folks, or even people who are just questioning, just to kind of like get some stuff out there, I guess. This isn't to say that similar content isn't already out there and available, but more is better. Just as a quick disclaimer, this is going to talk about dysphoria, some emotional challenges that I faced, and just some other stuff that might be kind of difficult for people to hear. So if you are in a mental space where this is a challenging topic for you, maybe just step aside for a little bit, come back to it when you're ready. The other thing I wanted to mention is when I use the term trans here, I'm talking about anyone who identifies as a gender different from the one that they were assigned at birth. So this includes binary trans identities and non-binary trans identities, just so we're clear. First things first. The trans experience is pretty rife with social, political, medical gatekeeping, and those are things that I want to elaborate on at another time for a number of reasons, and they're also things that are really kind of challenging and shitty for a number of reasons. Today I wanted to focus on the impact that that has on people who are questioning, or that it potentially has on people who are questioning. I know that it was true for me. And I know that I'm not alone in this. I spent a lot of time convincing myself that I couldn't possibly be trans because I didn't measure up to this whole idea of the essential trans experience. Basically, every loophole that I could find to, tell myself that, no, that's not me, that isn't me, I would exploit it. And I think it's because of this really, really, prominent image of, like, what dysphoria is supposed to look like. How could I possibly be transgender if I was ever happy about anything ever? What I was going through was just a regular amount of self-hatred. This is what everyone goes through. Sure, I had dysphoria, and I drifted through my day-to-day life in a state of pretty much perpetual dissociation, feeling like a ghost, but, didn't everyone? And yeah, I might have experienced a weird, painful longing every time I saw a friend announce their plans to go on HRT, but didn't everyone? It would have been nice to not take 24 years to realize that feeling like a ghost is not actually a normal part of the day-to-day human experience. And that, shockingly, cis people don't really think about gender in an active sense all the time. It's not actually a painful topic that consumes a staggering amount of their emotional energy. I think had I not been surrounded by narratives that demanded a certain level of explicit suffering to demonstrate adequate transness, I probably would have come to terms with who I was a lot sooner and been able to be myself a lot sooner. And I say this as somebody who first concluded I was a boy back when I was 4 years old. It wasn't until I was 28 that I actually, did something about that and came out and realized what it meant. Granted, some of this has to do with the fact that I didn't even know trans men existed until I was 18, but that's a story for another day. So it took me 24 years to start putting all of these pieces together. I can't even imagine how complicated this process is for people who don't even start gathering the pieces until they are already into adulthood. And that leads to another denial mechanism of not realizing you're trans until you're an adult, which is, well, I'm too old anyway, like it's too late for me, I might as well just stay the course. No, it's never too late to be yourself, and I'm not saying that you should rush into making any irreversible decisions, but please don't fall down that trap of it's too late for me, because that's just a paralyzing loop of, nope, I'm too old, and that's no. Back on my bullshit. So after getting over the hurdle of am I trans enough, I got into the fun game of what if I'm not trans at all, and that's a party that I really wish I could have bailed on, but I found so many ways to convince myself that what I was experiencing wasn't actually legit. Like, no, I'm not trans, I just think I'd be a much hotter man than I am a woman. Never mind the fact that a cis woman's idea of a more attractive version of herself probably isn't a man. But hey, no, I'm not trans, I'm just so attracted to men that I want to be one. That's how that works, right? I'm just gonna brush aside all of my bisexuality and attraction to women as well. I spent so long running in these circles before finally deciding to flip the script and instead ask, what if I'm not cis? And that was a really small change that made a really big difference for me. Because at that point, I stopped looking at the past and I started looking at the future. And when I really narrowed in on myself, I couldn't picture that person as a woman, no matter how hard I tried. This process led me into the realization that my entire sense of self up to this point in my life had been built pretty much entirely around other people. That I was using my relationship with others and the social feedback that gave me to create this idea of myself. I was my social performance, and I came into focus only by being a supporting character. It was a snare I'd set for myself because in tying my identity to other people, it only meant that the inevitable truth of what that identity was would have a much bigger impact when I finally came out about it. It made just being me feel like an aggressive act against other people. And how fucked up is that? You're right in the midst of processing the fact that you've been lying to yourself for so long, and then you feel like you were lying to everyone else around you, and that's not true, but it doesn't matter that it's not true because irrational guilt brain is just kind of a dick. It wasn't until I actually pictured myself as a man that I became a viable protagonist in my own mind. Then my understanding of myself began to exist both in my connections with others and outside of my connections with others. It was an incredibly freeing feeling. That's not to say it was cut and dry. Like, I had still absorbed that cultural script of get married, have kids, white picket fence, blah, 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 all of that stuff. And having that structure of what your life is supposed to look like was really comfortable up until it was suddenly gone. And I feel like this is something that a lot of people who aren't cisgender and heterosexual go through, is suddenly no longer having a cultural script to reference. You suddenly have to draft your own trajectory and identity while spiraling out of control because everything that you've ever known is suddenly lost and it's not a good time. At least it wasn't for me. Sure, I could finally see myself clearly, but everything that I had built around this female identity was just suddenly under threat, and what would happen if it all came crashing down? And I don't want to sugarcoat things, it kinda did. The fears that had pushed me into denial for so long, a lot of them did end up playing out, and I'm not gonna sit here and say but I picked myself up and I dust myself off and I persevered. No. I spent a good week crying myself sick with my boyfriend of 9 years after we acknowledged that my transition would inevitably lead to the end of our relationship. I spent months engaging in exhausting conversations with people who didn't understand, desperately needed to understand, and were leaning on me to understand when I wasn't even in a place where I fully understood myself yet. This isn't to say that I didn't have support. I have amazing friends and family who were behind me 100%. And even when my transition did reach that place where my relationship with my partner couldn't continue, he was still fully supportive of the fact that I needed to do it. He made it pretty clear that it wasn't fair to either of us for me to deny my need to be my authentic self, and that playing a role for his sake or anyone else's sake would just lead to more pain down the line for both of us. I couldn't keep up that performance for other people, and I'm really lucky to have a best friend who loves me enough to understand that. And yes, we are still best friends. But all in all, the process was a lot. I don't think I've ever been through anything so emotionally taxing, and even in the first few months of HRT, when I first started noticing those really exciting initial changes, I was done. I was so tired. And I think that being honest about the fatigue that I felt is really important. There was more than one occasion where I tried to convince myself that I was making a mistake, or that I should just not bother because what was the point? It was too much, I couldn't handle it. If that was going to be my new normal, if I was just going to be miserable and tired and self-doubting and just cut off from everything all the time, what was even the point? Even hearing people use the right name and pronouns felt weird because it was something that I also needed to adjust to. Sure, I had this wonderful moment of realization where I came to terms with who I was, and it was very exciting, and the idea of having a future as that person was just the biggest thrill, but I still needed to adjust to what that was and what that would look like. And after a lifetime of living as a certain person and presenting a certain way, gotta give yourself time to adapt. That is going to be quite a change. But even so, every single time I noticed one of those changes that I was looking for, I felt such an amazing feeling of just realness and connection with myself that even when things got darkest, I knew that I was still doing the right thing. Up to that point, I'd never been able to be alone with myself and be even kind of happy with who that person was. And I didn't know that it was possible to feel at home in your identity. Being able to just be alone without that sense of loss and emptiness was basically the confirmation that I had been looking for. So, here I am 1 year on testosterone and very much certain that this was the right thing for me to do. And I wanted to reach out. Because I know that this has been a hard time for everyone, and I know that more than a few of you have probably spent this time in isolation reflecting on some things that you'd otherwise been avoiding. If any of this resonates with you and you are in a state of questioning, it might be worthwhile to ask yourself a few direct questions. Who are you honestly basing your decisions around? Whether it's in favor of transition or against it. Who's at the center of those decisions? And is it you, or is it other people around you? Where's the desire coming from? Where's the fear coming from? Does it feel more like grasping at a potential solution or avoiding one that seems obvious? And finally, when you remove yourself from the context of other people, what does that image of you look like? But regardless of the answers to any of these questions, please know that you're not alone. It's okay to be scared, it's okay to be exhausted, it's okay to have doubts, and it's okay to take the time that you need to work through those things. This is your life, and you can't let anyone tell you one way or another what it's supposed to look like. You were given a scripted childhood, and you were probably doing a pretty good job of sticking to it up until now. And suddenly having it yanked away is more than a little bit terrifying. But there is a future for you, and you do deserve to be happy in it. If you are a trans person or someone who's questioning, you're allowed to take the time and space you need to figure that out. If you're a cis person and you're trying to better understand this process, make sure that you let your loved one take the lead. And even if it does turn out to be just a phase, so what? Trying to push them one way or another is just going to hinder a valuable opportunity for honest self-discovery. It could either push them to double down and rush into big decisions that they might later regret, or it could inhibit them from accessing something that they might need to be authentic. So just be there and love them one way or another. I think that just about covers everything, at least for now. There's some stuff that I touched on here that I would like to revisit at a later date. If anything jumped out at you in particular, or if you think that there's anything I missed, please feel free to elaborate in the comments section below. If you want to see more, please hit the subscribe button, and keep washing your hands. Thank you.